God doesn't tell us to worship him because he has an ego or because he's selfish and just wants all this worship towards him. He tells us and urges us to worship him because he's very aware that whatever we worship, that is what we become. God wants us to become more like him. And I believe that this word is going to be for somebody. So I encourage you to open up your hearts because this touched me so deeply. God wants us to become more like him. And every single day and every part of our lives, we begin to worship something unintentionally or even intentionally. Some examples of that may be identity and performance. If you are so concerned about performing, what do you become? If you are idolizing performance, you become prideful. If you idolize somebody, you lose yourself in the process trying to reflect, and you become dependent on them and you become insecure. If you idolize comfort, pleasure, or entertainment, we become spiritually numb. Why? Because we are comfortable with not having the fear of God, with not having reverence for him, with no longer having a need for God. In Psalms 115, it says this, verse 4-9. It says, "But their idols are silver and gold, made by human hands. They have mouths but cannot speak, eyes but cannot see, ears but cannot hear, noses but cannot smell. They have hands but cannot feel, feet but cannot walk, nor can they utter a sound with their throats. Those who make them will be like them, and so will all who trust in them." The emphasis on those who make them will be like them. So if we begin to make an idol in our lives, whether that's social media, whether that's a person, whether that's performance, whatever it may be, if we begin to make that idol, we become like that idol. And so God calls us and urges us to worship him, not just because, for no reason, not just because he needs to be worshiped. He doesn't need us. We need him. He urges us to worship him because he is aware he is the only perfect being. And we need to worship him so that we can be more like him, more like Jesus. That is the whole point of Christianity. The whole point of following Jesus is to reflect him, to be more like him. So worshiping isn't just lifting up your hands and giving a good song to God. It is literally an alignment and reshaping of your heart towards Jesus, realigning your mind and your heart and your spirit, letting go and surrendering of past unintentional or intentional idols in your life, and realizing that the only one that we need to worship, the only one that brings fulfillment, satisfaction, comfort, knowledge, and wisdom in our lives is through God. So when we worship him, we reflect his nature, his holiness, his love, and his truth, and so on. And I think oftentimes our flesh can so easily shift our understanding of like, wow, like why do I need to do this? Why do I need to worship? And the thing is that our minds are so closed off to what God actually wants for us. Our minds cannot even comprehend the love that he has for us, the depth of love that he has for us, to urge us to worship him so that he can fulfill us. Because he knows the power that he holds, and he wants and he's willing to give it to us. He's willing to pour it out in us. He's willing to fill us with it if we would just submit and give it to him. We can be so closed off to what God wants for us, for what he desires for us, because we are so concerned with what we want to do, with who we're talking to, with our will, and we can stay holding on to our will and our way, and we don't even know what God has for those who love him so deeply. It's time to shift our hearts and shape our hearts back in alignment with God and worship him for who he is, for what he's done, and what we are able to be blessed by through him in our lives, living the abundant life that he has promised us.